If we're talking completely personal, most disappointing feelings that we've had this year, not, anything close to objective, critical views on these games, maybe they play extremely well, they're still totally recommendable in of themselves, and they are potentially divisive. I've got two. One of them is Resident Evil 3. I just kind of couldn't believe that Capcom put something out that felt so much like glorified DLC. Pretty much finished it in one sitting. It was only like 4 or 5 hours long or something. And it just felt so threadbare. I thought actually fighting Nemesis was lame. I just didn't think it was anywhere near as enjoyable as being hunted through the RTPD by Mr. X. And I just thought they would have done so much more with that. I thought Nemesis himself would be so much more fleshed out. I thought they would set the standard for the idea of a, following, pursuing AI in a horror game. In a similar vein as something like the Xenomorph in Alien Isolation. I just thought they would do so much more with that. So it would be RE3. But my other one, to be completely honest, is Last of Us 2. And it's not that I don't love what Last of Us 2 is as a big work of art, as a creative endeavor from one of the most talented teams in the industry, but I personally didn't really need that story. I was, forever looking forward to The Last of Us 2. Oh my God, where are they going to take this? How do you even do a part 2, considering where we left off? And it's not that I didn't thoroughly enjoy my time with Last of Us 2. I was actually giddy when that big twist happened at the beginning, because it meant that all the leaks that I thought I'd read were actually wrong, and everything was just, everything was on the table as in regards to where the story could go. But by the time I hit the credits, and as the credits were rolling, I was in a complete mess considering the severity of the final couple scenes. But I did think to myself, I don't know if I needed that. And the direction they took it in a completely subjective way, is not what I would have wanted from Joel and Ellie, let's say. I just, for the sequel of for the sequel to The Last of Us, to sort of steer so far away from the more philosophical underpinnings of the original. The original poses so many questions and has this mentality, this heart of warmth at its core, that says that even though the apocalypse is absolutely horrific and all these different things are up against you, all you need is one solid connection. And obviously in The Last of Us's case, it's a father-daughter thing. Last of Us 2 doesn't really have that. There are pieces in there, and I've done a whole video on it about how the overall game is a reinforcement of why we need human connection, but I think you really have to go looking for that in more of a, you have to dig that out in a way, and it's buried underneath so many layers of, like I said, not black-hearted, but just, sour sort of mentalities. They really want to make you feel like hell throughout that game. And like I said, it's not where I would have taken those characters personally. It's not what I necessarily wanted from those characters. I wanted another adventure with them. I wanted more conversations with them. And every time I think back on just how little dialogue there is between the two main characters, I can't help but be disappointed. So that's complete brass tacks, raw honesty. The Last of Us 2 is sadly one of my most disappointing games of the year. But I totally think that it's also an immaculate video game that everybody should play. So here I am, 2020 energy has completely embodied me.
Hello there friends, Casual Gaming's Andy Murray here, and I only buy about 3 to 5 new games a year. I don't buy several in a month, it's an every now and then kind of thing for me. I try to stick to things that I know are going to hit, things that I know I'm going to love. Surefire, can't miss games. Unfortunately, when one of those does fall short of expectations, well, the disappointment is huge. Because like I say, I only buy 3 or 5 a year, so when you have 2 of them that let you down in the same year, boy, maybe I should just give up gaming. The first one is Doom Eternal, which is the sequel, of course, to this, Doom 2016, my game of the decade, a perfect first-person shooter that just needlessly adds a whole bunch of bollocks, stupid platforming, flame pillar columns that rotate, moving platforms, you have to change weapons every 5 seconds in combat because there's no goddamn ammo. It is a classic case of addition by subtraction. It's still a good game, but they took that franchise from a 10 out of 10 to a 6. Now, speaking of 10 out of 10s, one game that I thought was going to hit that mark for sure is one I was waiting a long time for, since the moment it was first announced in 2013, before the PS4 was even announced. This game right here. What is this game in this lovely brown box, you ask? Well, it's my copy of Cyberpunk 2077 on PlayStation 4. So, I'm sure you PC gamers, you PS5 gamers, you Xbox thing, whatever the new one of those is, gamers are having a great time with this thing. It looks awesome on those platforms. On PS4, on the current gen or the last gen or gen and whatever gen you want to talk about, this thing is unplayable. You've heard all these criticisms already. I don't need to go over every single one, but you know, for something to be in development for that long, 7-8 years, and to come out this really unplayable, the frame rate is particularly annoying because it chugs to such a slowdown that you can't even shoot straight. You're pointing your gun around like this, just jittering and jiving. It is horrendous. It is a vastly diminished experience, and you know, I've already sold this goddamn thing. It arrived on Thursday morning here in the Murray household. It was packaged up by Saturday night and it will be going in the post tomorrow. I'm gonna wait a year, gonna experience this as it's meant to be experienced on one of the next gen platforms, because at the moment it's a joke. And you know, CD Projekt Red have issued the statement saying we're gonna fix everything, we're really sorry, but brother, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. Let's not be simps for major corporations who don't care about you, the casual gamer, because that's the message they're sending when you release something as just gross and unfinished as this. It should have never made it past the testing stage. It should never have made it to the market in December. It should have been pushed back until the very last point that it was absolutely ready, complete, and just a final goddamn product. And yes, I'm well aware that Fallout 76 exists and we've had other disastrous launches in the past, and it's very easy for someone to sit there and go, well, why didn't you just buy it on PS5 then? It's beside the point. This thing was developed before PS4 was released, let alone PS5. So, like I said, let's stop sucking up to the developers. Let's stop letting them off the hook. This isn't good enough. This crap isn't good enough. I thought I was going to get the Deus Ex OG vibes that I craved, that I loved in that original Deus Ex game years ago, updated for Modern Palace. I thought I was going to spend weeks lost in this world. I spent about 10 hours, by the end of which I had pulled out, or tried to pull out, what little hair I have remaining on my head. Anyway, I've got a bit long-winded here, but both of those games, in relation to my expectations, absolutely sucked in 2020. Ghost of Tsushima, however, is tremendous, and the only one that hasn't let me down in 2020. Thank you to the Samurai Man. I love you very much. Goodbye.
So when it comes to disappointing games of this year, there are a few that I think have very much disappointed me. Resident Evil Resistance, Cyberpunk, it's just games that you were very hyped up about and very excited for when you first hear about them, and then they just turn out to just be bleh. You know, whether it's down to them not being ready or down to them not really telling you what the game is about and then it just kind of sucking. But something that I think was very interesting is taking a game that is actually a very good game and then porting it onto a different console, and that is Outer Worlds. I really enjoyed Outer Worlds. When it first came out, I played it to death. Like, it was one of those games that was like Skyrim or Fallout for me. Like, I was hooked. I was in there, you know, character creation, great story, great characters, great world, and I really wanted to get it on the Switch. So I paid for it, I got it on the Switch, and how is it that you can port a game to the Switch that is a very good game and somehow make it worse? Like, the graphics weren't great, the frame rate was awful, you know, there were blurry graphics, there were areas that you would go to on, you know, the Xbox or the PlayStation and they would be fine, you know, they'd be full of life, they'd be full of characters and creatures and enemies, but you go to these places on the Switch and they're barren, they're empty, and it makes no sense whatsoever. It made a very good game completely bland, and it just doesn't make sense to me. It seemed like they were just kind of cashing in to kind of just take a game that was actually doing, you know, relatively well, it was doing okay, and just port everything onto the Switch, take these games, port them onto the Switch, because people will buy that knowing that they can take games that they enjoy and take them with them. And it was just such a shame, and it really, I was very thoroughly disappointed because, you know, I spent money on this twice, and one of those times turned out to really suck, and yeah, I don't understand it. It physically makes no sense in my mind, and it is such a shame. So yeah, Outer Worlds on the Switch did not well, no.
Okay, so obviously the other week I mentioned how my personal worst game of the year was Predator Hunting Grounds, but there was another title that was in that conversation that was definitely a strong contender for the same title, and that was Marvel's Avengers, which I don't want to be too mean because I feel as though Marvel's Avengers is like the Krusty Burglar after Homer has completely decimated the Krusty Burglar, and now Square Enix and Marvel are all the crying children around being like, stop, it's dead, it's already dead. But you know what? It was the biggest disappointment for me this year. I can't get over that. I genuinely thought that, I know loads of people kind of begrudge the as-a-service model, but I thought if any genre, any kind of thing that would make that work, it would be superheroes, because, you know, the way story arcs unfold over a given period of time, the way you could react to certain events, the co-op element in particular as well, because, you know, being on a superhero team is one of the best comic book fantasies ever. And yet, it just never came together, and I do think it's down to the fact that they released it too early. There were so many bugs at launch, not enough of a roster. Combat was great, but the issue is, even though the combat is great, the level design is just so repetitive. The gameplay formula just wasn't for me, and yeah, it's a shame. Like, all I'm saying right now is, you know, a game done goofed when it introduces my favorite Avenger, Hawkeye, and I'm not compelled to play it. I'm not compelled to play a game with Hawkeye in the year of our Lord 2020. That is daft. That is mad. Something is seriously wrong there. So yes, Marvel's Avengers is my most disappointed game of the year. Because for a whole host of reasons. 1, I'm a dork. 2, I'm a Marvel dork. And 3, I had high hopes. I had uncharacteristically high hopes compared to everyone else. So yeah, Marvel's Avengers, big, not good.